to infinity and beyond.
This is me. This is how I win.
Were you rushing or were you dragging? Answer!
You're a wizard, Harry.
Say what again? Say what again? I dare you.
No, I am your father.
Hasta la vista, baby.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
And here we go.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back inside the film room. Zach Goins here with Jake Lawler.
Hello.
We are coming at you with a new release for the first time in quite some time. Jake, we are here to discuss Extraction today, a new Netflix movie. Obviously we're not jumping into that right away here, but just, what is it like to kind of have something new to talk about instead of just binging series and rewatching old movies and stuff? Like, isn't it a great feeling?
Yeah, it's exciting. I think that after doing cinema court and after kind of watching countless movies that have been released like 40 years ago, I'm very excited to get back on the train and kind of we'll talk about Extraction.
Yeah, we've got that coming up today. We're going to do, in honor of that being a very, very violent movie, we are going to talk our top 5 action movies of the past decade of the 2010s. And we are also there's a little bit of news for us to talk. So it's kind of going to be like a normal episode, even though we're still in these strange times. Hope everybody's staying safe out there. But Jake, what have you been up to? We haven't really had a quarantine check-in in the past couple weeks. So what's your status? How are you holding up?
I'm good. Family's still good. Everybody's still good. I'm just still working on a few things for Los Angeles, as well as watching a lot of movies. I've kind of knocked a lot of ones that I haven't seen off the list. I'm trying to kind of get back, just cut through the list a little bit more about the things that I should have seen or things that I've been wanting to see. So it's been good. Right. It's been good to kind of relax, and school's basically over now. So
yeah. So what is that? I guess what's the status of your big move to LA? Is that still going to be able to happen, or do you have to kind of wait until everything settles down, or how does that work?
Yeah, no, I should still be able to move this summer. So
it's exciting. They gotta keep making movies out there, keep having geniuses come out to Hollywood. So
yeah. How was the draft coverage?
Oh man, that was the busiest weekend of my life. It was the first ever NFL draft experience, is also the first virtual draft. So it was stressful to have everybody in every different corner of Charlotte working, just doing everything remotely, having tons of video calls and trying to keep up with each other. But it went pretty smoothly. I was very proud with everything that we put out, all the content we did. Got quick turnarounds on some quality stuff, and I think we got a good group of guys coming into Charlotte to the Panthers that hopefully they'll get to see the field this season, if there is a season.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It looked like you guys had a
full
full
Tar Heels
draft.
Yeah, full
draft.
defense. That's first time in the common draft era, all 7 defensive players. So we went after offense and free agency, so defense was the path in the draft. But we also got some Tar Heels drafted and some Tar Heels signed as free agents. Congrats to those boys out there. Jake, I'm sure that everybody was pumped in Chapel Hill for that.
Yeah, no, it was great. I mean, it was a really deep draft this year, which is really cool to kind of see just how many, just the talent pool that got selected, as well as a friend of mine, Julian Okwara, a friend of ours,
USPC fan,
Stro, Charlie, both being drafted, and then guys like Miles and Jake and Aaron Crawford and
D Ross,
all
and Antonio
going to the Bills. I mean, yeah, no, it was awesome. I thought they did a really good job with with the coverage and everything. I did think that it was a little bit kind of the the coverage was a little bit sad
about the tragedies.
Yeah, I mean, it was just
Yeah,
probably could handle that better, but
yeah, but other than that though, I think the actual like procedure of everything went well. I mean,
very smooth, yeah.
I had made a bingo card for the Panthers that we posted that were like basically like someone talks over somebody leaves their mic on mute. Like we thought it was going to be like a continuous like Zoom meeting basically.
Yeah.
And it pretty much went off without a hitch. So that was really, really good to see. And we'll see how that affects the draft moving forward. But yeah, it was a busy weekend to say the least.
Absolutely.
You know what else was busy? Here, I'm taking one of your segues.
One of the segues.
It's been quite some time since we've had some news, so let's get into a little bit. But I guess this was probably a week or two ago at this point, but we haven't talked about it yet. And you know that we're always on that Dune beat. So we had the Vanity Fair first look like they did with Star Wars. They got the rights with Dune as well. So they released, I want to say it was like 10 to 12 photos from the movie Dune. We got to see a young Paul Atreides and Lady Jessica and Duke Leto. Like it was exciting. And they also had the article to accompany it. What were your initial reactions to that, getting ready for December release?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I think that we've kind of, talked about it a little bit up to this point where it's a great book. And I think that it's a stellar cast, stellar crew. It all looked great. It looked fascinating. The article was really interesting. And, hopefully we'll get to see a trailer in the next month or two. Because some of the pictures look like screen grabs from the trailer footage. So,
yeah, I mean, there was a blend. I think there was a blend of like staged photos and the more like natural ones. Like obviously that first one that we saw the day before of Timothée Chalamet, that was like straight up screenshot basically. But yeah, I mean, I've got like 30 to 50 pages left in the book. So I've been grinding through it. I had to put it on delay this weekend. Didn't really have much free time, but I'm ready to finish it up and I'm excited to see what happens at the end and get ready for the movie. I was talking with Johnny, our friend Johnny, good friend of the pod, but I was talking with him and I didn't realize that I knew it was going to be two movies, but I thought it was like book one and book two, not book one being split into two movies.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that this is the way to go. It's and now, I mean, reading the book, like there's no way that anyone could do the story justice, do the world justice in one film. So, the possibility of there being two sort of contingent on how well the first one does is something that's promising and something that's, honestly the right decision. So,
yeah, I mean, there's a extreme amount of world building and just like development that has to go into it that you don't want to rush anything. But I will say it's a little like, I don't want it to end up, obviously this book is longer than Mockingjay, the third Hunger Games book. But like that one, the issue there was that like the first one was kind of like slow build up and that the second one, they let it rip. So I hope that there's not like, I'm just worried that the first one might be a little slow, and I hope that's not the case because, like you said, like if the first one is a bust, then they might not get around to making that second one, which would be a shame.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that I think it's going to be something something that I'm incredibly excited for, especially with all the shifting dates and stuff, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But it's still being kind of on the slate for December is definitely something
they're committed to it.
Yeah. Absolutely. But on the topic of shifting dates, Spider-Man 3, there's a bunch of Spider-Man news. So Spider-Man 3 is shifted from July 16th, 2021 to November 5th, 2021. Spider-Verse 2, April 8th. It was originally scheduled for April 8th, 2022, and it moved back to October 7th, 2022. And then Venom, which was originally scheduled for October 2nd of this year, has moved to June 25th of 2021. So coronavirus is still impacting the film world and impacting every aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, there have been a ton of other delays, but these are kind of based on what we typically talk about, these are the ones that I selected that are kind of right up our alley. But I mean, the Venom move from this year to next summer, that kind of put it right back to back with Spider-Man 3. And then I believe there was another MCU movie that was moved. So it just kind of got way too crowded. They had to move Spider-Man 3 back. But what did come in, though, was Uncharted, the movie also starring Tom Holland, slid into that Spider-Man 3 summer 2021 date. So you lose one Tom Holland movie and get another one. So still, we'll see if that actually ends up coming out. But because that's been, as you all know, in development hell for quite some time. So
For sure.
fingers crossed on that one. And then we've also got Mission Impossible. Tough news for Ethan Hunt. Mission Impossible 7 goes from July 21, 2021 to November 19th of that same year, while the 8th movie goes from August 5th of 22 to November 4th of 22. So that means that Tom Cruise will be 60 years old when Mission Impossible 8 comes out, which is absolutely ridiculous when you consider everything that he is doing in those movies.
Yeah, I mean, and the crazy part about it is that I have no problem, I have no worry that he won't be physically ready. I mean, because I think that we've seen up to this point about how dedicated he is, how much he keeps himself in shape, how tremendous Fallout was. I mean, that's one of the great action movies of the decade, which we'll kind of get into a little bit later here. But him being 60, for anyone, that would be sort of like an eye opener and someone to kind of worry about. And for me, I'm just all right, well, I'm sure he's fine with it because he's basically ageless.
Yeah. I mean, obviously they'll have filmed it beforehand. So, yeah. But still, it's just kind of when you hear very different ages, but when you hear that Harrison Ford's going to be 82 or whatever when that next Indiana Jones movie comes out, it's just one of those things that just doesn't sound right. But this move in dates does mean that Tom Cruise will be dominating the holiday box office for 3 years straight, because we've got, Top Gun Maverick this year at Christmas, then MI7 and MI8 the next 2 years. So we'll be spending our holidays with Mr. Cruise.
Oh, I can't think of anyone better to share it with.
Exactly.
Someone also that we've been sharing a lot with is Michael Jordan as of late, with the new Last Dance documentary from ESPN. I think it broke the record. I think there was 6 million people watching.
It was the highest watched or most watched ESPN documentary,
which is just incredible considering the quality content that they put out up to this point. But also kind of realistic considering, the time that we're in. Have you been you've been watching it, haven't you?
I have. I watched the first 2. We're recording this on Sunday, so 2 more episodes coming tonight. But yeah, I mean, the first 2 were great. It's fun to watch, I think, especially for people our age, because I don't know, I don't mean to speak for you, but for myself, I've grown up obviously knowing of the legend of Michael Jordan and hearing all about him and seeing stuff, and of course being a UNC student, knowing that lore, but kind of seeing this super in-depth behind the scenes look at everything and just really figuring out more details about everything. It puts a lot more into perspective and really just kind of opens your eyes to how big he was in Chicago, in the US, around the world, just everything about him.
Yeah, I mean, it's been incredibly well made. I think that, and it does a great job of sort of contextualizing the experiences of the Last Dance, the last season that Michael Jordan had, while bringing a lot of things to light, as well as, his rookie year, his time in Carolina, how the Bulls looked as a franchise, other players like Scottie Pippen, where I believe that the Dennis Rodman saga is coming out tonight. So we'll get to see more about
where
that.
He wanted to go to Las Vegas in the middle of the season.
Yeah. But it's been incredible. It's been supremely well done. And I'm very excited, as much as really kind of the rest of the world, that, or at least everybody, the millions of people that are watching, to kind of tune in and see what else, or where else the story's going.
2 major highlights for me. First was just the rest of the world, because literally everyone's watching this right now because it's the closest thing to live sports that we have. But so anyone who needs that fix is tuned in. But just having the rest of the world get to see how charming Roy Williams was incredible, because we've grown up around it and like attended UNC for the last 4 years. So we know all about it, but seeing the rest of the world be like, who's this guy saying dad gum and rootin' tootin' and just being so Southern and folksy, like, and we're just like, oh yeah, that's Roy, come on. And now everybody loves him. And then also, of course, Barack Obama, former Chicago resident, iconic lower third there.
Yeah, it's amazing. But it really is great. But there has been other stuff that's come out. What else have you been watching, Jack?
Yeah, without movies, I've been really diving into a whole lot of Netflix stuff. I mean, Jake and I both binged Too Hot to Handle, the absolute trashiest reality show ever that Netflix is. I love that Netflix is like diving into the reality show, game show kind of world, because those are always like either very entertaining, like say a Survivor or something, or they're just like terrible, like guilty pleasure shows. But this one was definitely one. You want to talk about that for a minute before we get into the other stuff we've been watching? Because I think there's a lot to be said about Too Hot to Handle.
I mean, honestly, like I like, of course, in the beginning, I'm just like, oh my God, these are the worst people ever. But
right.
Whether it be scripted or whether it be natural or organic, I mean, I do think that they came to sort of like a better and more stable and like kinder, more beneficial resolution than like some of the other reality shows that I've seen, where it's just like a predatory environment. And it's like up to, it's like survival of the fittest. Whereas this one, it seemed like a little bit more about personal development.
Togetherness. Yeah. And exactly. Also so for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, Too Hot to Handle the premise is basically there's 10 to 12 extremely attractive people that are scantily clad, living in a oceanfront resort, tropical island paradise. And they come here thinking it's going to be like some sort of dating show. And they get there, they're all hitting it off. And then they find out that there's $100,000 prize, but you're not allowed to touch. You're not allowed to kiss, to do any sort of physical contact that could be deemed sexual. And if you do, you get money deducted from the end prize. So these people are just like, oh my God, I can't go a month without having sex. And meanwhile, everybody's at home is like, for $100,000, are you kidding me? Like, it's like, no, not an issue. No, I would not touch anyone at all for $100,000. It's absurd, but it makes for extremely entertaining stuff. I mean, seeing how ridiculous these characters are. Like I say they're real people, but I say characters because they all fit these like ditzy airhead or like evil kind of. Haley was the worst in my opinion, the one who got kicked off early, because she's just like, I don't care what these people say, they're stupid, I don't like them, I'm cooler than you. But it was. What was your impression of like when we get to the end, spoiler alert, that they all split the money basically? What was your takeaway?
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of kind of what I was alluding to. I mean, I do think that, like I said, I'm prefacing this all with, because this very well just could have been a scripted show that took place with real people. But, and kind of using that same perspective, that I do think that it really was more focused on like personal development and growth, as opposed to like other shows that I've seen where it's just more just about like amping up the drama until like it reaches a breaking point and then stopping and then amping it up again. Right. So I think that, giving the people that like stayed on long enough to sort of like chill out and realize that like they're here for another purpose and not just to have sex is, something definitely to kind of hang your hat on a little bit, and just in terms of the genre of, or like, the world of TV that it finds itself in.
Right. And I mean, I think just you can see that growth as you're watching it. Like, I mean, like Harry and Francesca got less hateable. And then like Bryce came in late and I was like, oh, this guy's the worst right off the bat. And then I ended up kind of liking him after he kind of settled down a little bit. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see everyone and watch them in this environment. I think that Sharon and Rhonda were my favorites. I thought David was cool. He's just kind of doing his own thing. Chloe was a little bit ditzy, but she embraced that. My boy Jesus, sad to see him go.
Yeah,
that was devastating. I'm trying to think who else out there. The Irish girl, that was Nicole. That was so sad that she barely got any screen time.
yeah, I know.
She seemed cool.
Yeah, she was, but I don't think she was dramatic enough for them to show.
Right, they were like, okay. I feel like that was the thing with Jesus. They might have like pushed him out because they're like, okay, you're not really doing anything here for us, so we need to get you out of here.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Enough on Too Hot to Handle. What else have you been watching, Jake?
So like in addition to a lot of movies that I've kind of just been trying to catch up on, I actually started Little Fires Everywhere, which is the Reese Witherspoon and Kerry Washington
Hulu, right?
show. Yeah, it's on Hulu. It's great. I mean, I think I'm on the 4th episode, and it's supremely well done again. I mean, you know, Reese Witherspoon and Kerry Washington are really kind of tour de forces, but everybody else is doing a tremendous job. I think the writing is really strong as well.
I'm excited to. I've been meaning to check that out, but I want to read the book first for Little Fires Everywhere.
Yeah, I heard there was a book.
Rebecca is currently reading it, and so she was going to finish that up and pass it off to me. But I've been once I get Dune done, I might hop on that and then get to the show eventually. But what else were you watching?
Community, which is I'd seen it before.
Classic.
Yeah, I mean, I'd seen it when live television was like still a thing.
Right.
But they just put it back on Netflix a few weeks ago, and it holds up tremendously. It's just amazing.
I don't think I ended up, because they did something weird. It was like the last season I watched was the one where Troy leaves, where Donald Glover leaves the show. And then they like did a season on Yahoo or something. So I didn't watch that. So there's some that I haven't seen. So I might need to get back and binge that. But I've been watching the show Outer Banks, which is new on Netflix. It's shout out to Chapel Hill in there. Have you heard the meme about this?
Yeah, where it's like they took a ferry
from the Outer Banks to Chapel Hill. And that is not accurate.
Yeah, I don't think there's a ferry that goes through this, because that would mean like half of North Carolina is underwater.
Exactly. But that's like it's fun. It's like a kind of treasure hunt show, but it's very cringy at times. It's like kind of like teenage romance stuff. So it's passable. It's passable. Yeah. And then I've also been watching, I got screeners for 2 shows for Netflix. One is called Hollywood. That's from Ryan Murphy, that comes out May 1st. It comes out this coming Friday. But it's like set in the 50s, 40s, 50s, like kind of revisionist history of what Hollywood would have been like if African Americans had been given a chance, if gay people had been given a chance, if women were in power, like to really kind of revamp the Hollywood machine over there. And so that was really good. I'm excited for more people to check that out. I'll have a written review coming later this week. And then also Space Force, which is coming in May, end of May. It's the new sitcom on Netflix from, not really sitcom, but a comedy from Steve Carell and Greg Daniels, who made The Office. And it's about the Space Force that Trump created. And they're really just kind of these Air Force people trying to figure out what the heck they're supposed to be doing with the Space Force. But it's got Steve Carell and John Malkovich and Matthew Schwartz, I think is his name, John Ralphio from Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
It's got a really good cast, and that's pretty funny as well. So been really diving into some Netflix shows.
I got it. Well, speaking of diving into Netflix, we do have a review of the new Netflix film Extraction from stunt coordinator Sam Hargrave, the new Chris Hemsworth film.
This is an extraction.
So who are the players?
Biggest drug lord in India versus biggest drug lord in Bangladesh.
Some mythic shit, huh?
It's a kidnapping. Drug lord's son. Clock's running at 16 hours. Proof of life as of 6 hours ago.
That kid is a walking corpse, and there's no way to protect him. The best thing you could do for that kid would be to put a bullet in his brain.
We can send a chopper and get you out. But you gotta leave the kid behind.
Are you going to leave me in the street?
I'll get you home.
Let's break it down. So, like you said, this is from Sam Hargraves, who was the stunt coordinator for a number of movies. I know we've got Endgame and Infinity War, I believe. What else is on his resume, Jake? Do you know off the top of your head? I'm pulling it up, so.
Because I was on a tear, like looking about Chad Stahelski, who did John Wick, and
right,
they've overlapped together on a few things.
Okay, so Sam Hargrave, first time director here, but he's been the stunt coordinator on Avengers Endgame, Deadpool 2, Infinity War, Ragnarok, Atomic Blonde, The Accountant, Suicide Squad. So this is most of these are coordinators, but some of them he's just like been in. But Mockingjay from the Hunger Games, Captain America: Civil War, Winter Soldier, Catching Fire, Her, the Joaquin Phoenix romance movie. Don't know what stunts were in that, but he's got an extensive resume here of just some really, really well done movies, and you can see that in this, that he, now that he's at the helm, he really invested in making sure that background that he has really showed through here.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that, with Chad Stahelski kind of creating the John Wick franchise with David Lettuce as well, and, just then helming it when David left to make Deadpool, and kind of like the revival, well, not really the revival, but it seems like there's like possibility of like a renaissance of like stunt people or stuntmen or stunt coordinators coming to the director's chair, which is really interesting because, they have such a great eye for how how action sequences, how fights can be shot, how, scenes can be set in terms of action movies. And, I think that this is just another thing. And also Sam Hargrave has kind of overlapped with Chad Stahelski on a couple of things as well. And, it's also really cool because he did a lot of work with the Russo brothers to have them kind of, Joe Russo wrote the script, and the Russo brothers actually produced the film as well. And having Chris Hemsworth attached to it just kind of shows a Marvel connection too.
Right. Those are really the big names here. As you see, it's kind of like with Candyman, where they say Jordan Peele's movie or whatever, but yeah, just because he's the producer. Or no, sorry, that's for Antebellum, right? That they were getting upset about. One of those movies.
That's for Candyman. That's for Candyman.
Okay.
Which,
okay. But it was like,
Nia DaCosta is the director of Candyman, but Jordan Peele is producing it.
Right, and so then everybody was like, "Oh, Jordan Peele's Candyman." That's kind of the way that they advertise this, of like, from the visionary people behind Endgame and Infinity War. But yeah, let's get into a little. I'll read off the synopsis here. Tyler Rake, played by Chris Hemsworth, is a fearless black market mercenary with nothing left to lose when his skills are solicited to rescue the kidnapped son of an imprisoned international crime lord. But in the murky underworld of weapons dealers and drug traffickers, an already deadly mission approaches the impossible, forever altering the lives of Rake and the boy. So you want to just go ahead and throw out the spoiler warning?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much to this other than the action, so might as well spoil it. But I mean, this thing's 63% critic score, 70% audience score. So I mean, it's doing pretty well, I would say, especially for a
first
Netflix movie. Yeah, first outing, direct to Netflix. I mean, it's what were your initial thoughts of this thing?
Yeah, so kind of coming into watching it, I'm actually watching it. One of my good friends from Charlotte is living with me right now in Chapel Hill for a bit, and we're just kind of watching basically everything together. And we watched this together, and the action, I think that you can tell when it was done by a stunt coordinator. Kind of going back to the stuff about John Wick, I mean, you can really tell when a guy that's been in the business for so long knows what he's doing, knows kind of how to shoot these different things. I know that the clip that went viral on Twitter, which was kind of the knife fight scene, which was part of the 12-minute oneer that we saw in Extraction, about it was kind of like side by side with the fight choreography of it. But overall, I mean, I thought it was fine. I thought the action, there were some really cool things that they did in here. I thought Chris Hemsworth did a tremendous job, as he usually does. But I thought it was fine.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, there's definitely the action is what you come for with this movie.
Absolutely.
It's impressive to see everything, the set pieces, the choreography. I think they did there was really some impressive camera work here. Like you mentioned with that 12-minute, it felt like it was like 25 minutes, but the one take scene that goes from on foot chase to a car chase to close quarters combat. It's just all over the place. And that was really impressive. The way one shot in particular, I wrote it down while I was watching, but they go from like the outside of the car to being inside the car. So I'm sure there was some sort of editing there, but the way it appears is that it's a one shot scene, but that was very cool. But there was some stuff still to be desired in the script section of it, I guess. The dialogue felt a little stiff. I mean, there wasn't really it seemed sort of, we've seen this type of movie before, whether it's Logan, whether it's Sicario, Day of the Soldado, the kind of begrudging tough guy that has to escort a child in need to a checkpoint. And I mean, Logan is one of the finest examples of that. Neither of us were super high on Sicario 2, but I mean, those movies had some sort of scene where it's like, oh, these two really develop a bond while they're on this. And I mean, they tried to do that here with a couple of different instances where the Ovi, the kid, is in bed and they're like chatting or something, and they're developing this trust. But I mean, none of it really hit me in a way that made me feel convinced that they cared for each other. So I mean, that could have been done a little bit better. But again, like I said, I mean, you want the explosions, you want the gun fights, the knife fights here, and that definitely delivered.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's kind of really poignant. I do think that some of the elements of the more kind of like the deeper stuff in terms of narrative, in terms of structure, in terms of character, some things they hit, some things they miss. But, in reality, I think that what you said is correct. I mean, it's a movie where you know what's going to happen. It's a movie where you're excited to see what's going to happen just because of the action, just because of who's making it and who's in it. The action, the stunts are all great. It looks great. And I think that's exactly, I mean, like you said, that's exactly what you come here for.
I know when we talked about John Wick 3, we had our like top 10 list, our highlight list of your favorite kills. Were there any that stood out to you here?
Not necessarily. I do think that I think that the one take shot was really cool. Well, I know it's not, it's just some very clever editing, but like what made it look like a 12-minute oneer was that whole sequence I thought was really kind of enthralling. I mean, just going from the house, not the house, to the building, and then down to the car, and then kind of down on the street. And, just like the relentless violence that's kind of going through the whole thing. And I do think also in the beginning, Chris Hemsworth, when he rescues Ovi for the first time, that whole fight sequence was really good too.
So mine is in there. First, I was like, oh, this is going to be it. When he kicks the table and like the side of the table kills the guy, like goes into his head. That was pretty wild. That reminded me of John Wick using the horse to kill someone. But I think then he topped that when Tyler Rake killed someone with a rake. That was did you even notice that there?
No, I didn't. He killed someone. Oh, he did. Oh, yeah, he did.
He shoved first he broke the rake and like stabbed the guy with it, with the handle of it, and then he like shoved the other guy's head into the spikes of the rake. And then I was like, wait a minute. They said his name 5 minutes later. I was like, wait, did they just say his name was Rake? So that was very on the nose. I wonder, that has to be intentional.
Yeah, I would love to read the screenplay for it. What if it's like he kills someone with a rake and then in parentheses like get it?
He got raked. Like he should have stood up over him and been like, "Get raked, son."
Yeah, just something
Um,
crazy.
but I mean, I think that was on top of like the never-ending gunfights and stuff. What did it ever get to the point where the violence felt gratuitous at all? Like, was it ever? Because I mean, it's pretty much from the get-go, and then it ends like that. Like, there's constant gore, violence, killing. Did it ever feel too much to you?
I mean, no, not necessarily for me, but I could definitely get how it'd feel too much for some people. I know that, we're about to, after, we finish up Extraction, we are going to talk about kind of our top 5 action movies of the decade. And a lot of the ones on my list are just sort of like gratuitous violence from start to finish. So it's something that
It's right up your alley.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that I sort of commend in action films when it's done right. And I think that they did a pretty good job of sort of, making the movie that they wanted to make here, which is exactly what we saw.
Right. I want to talk a little bit more about some of the story stuff. So what did you think? Let's talk about the end, I guess. What were your impressions of the ending? So we see on the bridge that Tyler gets shot and then he ends up falling over the side of the bridge, and you think that's the end. But then did you notice at the very end when
there's the guy that
comes out, there's somebody watching him from the side of the pool. Did you, I guess, does that mean that Tyler's still alive, that he somehow survived like 9 gunshots and a fall off a 50-foot bridge?
Yeah, I mean, it looked like he was down for the count, but the ending, of course, makes it a little bit more ambiguous. And he took quite a beating throughout the movie. So, I mean, I guess who's to say that he didn't survive? And obviously that was a super intentional choice to make it ambiguous. I'm under the impression that was Tyler, keeping up with his sort of watchdog protector role of Ovi. And, and I was actually just about to bring that up because I actually had to rewind it because Ben, my friend, was like, "Did you see that guy?"
Right. I would rewind it and pause it.
Yeah.
Gotta get rewind it, pause it, enhance. See if we can clarify that that it is him. But yeah, I mean, what about the decision that it was that kid that was the one that killed him? The kid that had tried to fight him earlier and he kind of just slapped him to the side.
That was kind of strange. Like I don't really know what the takeaway of that was. It's like,
right, because you see him get shot in the back, and then it's like, as he falls, like it's the reveal of who shot him. I thought it was going to be like the other gangster dude, not the little kid.
Yeah, it was kind of like, if you're a child soldier and you persevere you persevere through everything, you'll end up getting your target. And I'm like, I don't know if that's really the message that we want to kind of go away with. But I mean, they really did stick true to what they wanted to do. I mean, it was a brutal world that they created. I mean, but like in the beginning or towards the beginning where that guy just threw that kid off of the roof.
Yeah, he just first it was a shock from the start when the guy who was pretending to be a police officer just shoots Ovi's friend in the head when he kidnaps him.
Yeah.
And then they threw the little kid off the roof, and I was just like, oh my gosh, what are we getting into here? Like that was insane.
Yeah, I mean, and I do kind of commend them for that. I do think that, sticking to your guns and creating a world where it's believable that the stakes are high and that these people are dangerous is really what sort of like a good action movie is about. And, they absolutely committed to that. I mean, there were some predictable moments in there, but there are also moments where you thought it was going to go in one way and then it stuck to being brutal. It stuck to being violent and stuck to being deadly. And that's something that I do think that should be commended because it is a difficult it's a difficult sort of kind of ground to tread. So I thought they did a good job like sticking to that.
What was your reaction with the David Harbour cameo?
That was
Chief Hopper.
Yeah, I was so surprised. I mean, it was funny because I actually just watched The Green Hornet, and he's in The Green Hornet, which I've forgotten that he was in. And just like seeing him back to back, I was kind of like getting a little deja vu, but it was also kind of weird. But like it's good to see him.
I don't know if that's part of the Marvel connection with now that he's going to be in Black Widow, or if that's a part of his Netflix contract with it for Stranger Things. Like, oh, you have to appear in another movie that we do as well, just to kind of get that face recognition. But I like him, so I was fine with it. But the only issue was I'm supposed to believe that David Harbour could beat Chris Hemsworth up. Like because he was kicking his ass, and then would have gotten him if Ovi hadn't saved him. But that I'm having some trouble believing that part.
I also thought that was a good scene though when Ovi killed David Harbour's character, and then he instantly started
just sat on the chair or on the stairs.
Yeah. I mean, I thought that was pretty real and visceral. So
yeah, that kind of the first reaction to it. So I guess in closing here, before we move on to the top 5, anything else? What kind of score would you give it? What do you just final thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like we've kind of said, like we've been talking about, this is an action movie through and through. It doesn't necessarily pretend to be anything else other than that, which is not a bad thing. And I do think that, like, if you come in here with the mindset knowing that you're going to watch a lot of people get killed by Chris Hemsworth, then, you're going to have a great time.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, like I said, wanted a little more story-wise, but for what it is and for the time that we are in, beggars cannot be choosers when it comes to new movies at this point. But I would say I enjoyed it. But it's nothing great. I mean, nothing that you're really going to remember after the next couple weeks. But, it gets the job done right now.
Absolutely. It wouldn't be a classic Inside the Film Room podcast without, after doing a review, we do some sort of ranking, some sort of list. And right now we have for you, after the enthralling action of Extraction, also that probably a lyric somewhere, we have our top 5 action movies of the decade, going from 5 to 1. I think that this is something that was incredibly difficult for me. How was this process for you, Zach?
Yeah, I mean, it was when you're doing it, you don't really you forget how many incredible movies there were. I looked up a list to try and get some inspiration to just make sure I wasn't missing out on anything. But also, I mean, I think it's the issue when you're trying to classify an action movie, like so many movies have action. I tried to not do any superhero, any Marvel or anything like that, just because I feel like that's kind of its own subcategory, I guess, or whether it's like an action adventure movie or like a thriller movie that has action in it. Like it's just hard to find something that you want to fit your parameters here. But I was able to come out with a solid list, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it was extremely difficult, I think, in a few respects, really, because one, the 2010s were a great decade for action films. I mean, I think that like you said, going through the list and making sure you didn't miss anything, and then realizing, oh, that one's great, or that one's great, or that one's great, or this happened then. It's like, it was a tremendous decade for action films. There's a lot of great films in there. And I think that, really, in terms of my parameters, how I sort of categorized and how I sort of figured out what exactly I wanted to make the cut. Action is really a lot about spectacle. I think that really at the core of an action movie, I want to sit back and be like, I could never do any of that. And also say, like, how in the hell did they make this movie? Like, how did they shoot it?
Right.
Like, how did they get that done? And, it's great when you have the spectacle, when you have like the visceral, enthralling action from start to finish, and then when you are able to meld that and mesh that with a story that fits the narrative, fits the world you're trying to create, is something that it's truly brilliant. And it's wonderful to see, because, having the great balance of the both of those is what makes tremendous films, what makes tremendous action films, and eventually kind of what led me to sort of put the films on my list that I put on.
Well, I mean, with that's an incredible introduction there. So I think we should just get down to business. We're going to go 5 to 1. Jake, why don't you get us started with or do you have any honorable mentions before?
I do have a few honorable mentions that I like to highlight, because like I said, I literally sat here for like an hour trying to really kind of calm down and figure out what exactly. And the number 2 spot was really difficult. There's some that I had to leave off. So some of my honorable mentions are John Wick 1 and 2, Upgrade, which we saw together, which is, this was the hardest one to cut off, was Upgrade, to not have it in the top 5. Like, it would be 5B or 6. The Ip Man series, Edge of Tomorrow, Pacific Rim, which I do think is an action film, Kingsman, and then Dread, which was directed by kind of Pete Travis, and I think ghost directed by Alex Garland, who is responsible for Ex Machina and Annihilation, which is also a fantastic film. But those are the honorable mentions that I had to make it.
Right. I'm in the same boat with you on a lot of those. I said Kingsman as well and Upgrade as well for honorable mentions. Again, kind of some of the ones that I didn't really know how to qualify. So I put Inception as an honorable mention because there's plenty of action in that, but I don't really know if I would call it a straight up action movie. Skyfall, a great one with the James Bond series. And then I think this one just missed my list. I don't think we've ever talked about it, but Source Code. Have you seen that with Jake Gyllenhaal?
Yeah, I've seen Source Code. Mm-hmm.
That was a 2011 movie that I feel like it didn't really ever get the appreciation. I was looking it up and I was shocked to find out that it was a 92% on Rotten Tomatoes,
it's
a great
movie. Yeah,
it is.
Under the radar. Yeah,
I don't think enough people saw that. It's kind of you remember that one, and then kind of similar style, Eagle Eye. Did you see that? That was back in mid 2000s with Shia LaBeouf. But yeah, I mean, so that didn't make the list, but Source Code definitely did. But yeah, that's my honorable mentions as well. So now, why don't you get us started with number 5?
So I just came from seeing this movie, and it instantly made my top 5. I literally 30 minutes before we got on to record, I just finished up this film.
Wow, that's a buzzer beater.
Oh yeah, it's and I had to see it because I knew it's a shame I couldn't see the second one because I hear the second one is better. But my number 5 is The Raid. So The Raid is a film from 2011. It's an Indonesian action crime film, which is directed and edited by Gareth Evans, who is responsible for the second film, The Raid 2. And he also wrote another film that's on the list, on my list. And it is just, it's insane. I mean, it really is. It kind of instantly met the two things that I was talking about. It was like, I could never do this. And also, how in the hell did they make this happen?
Is it more? I haven't seen this, so I want to ask: is it more of Extraction style shoot 'em up, hand to hand action, or is it action as in big stunts kind of stuff?
Yeah. So no, that's a great point. So it's very much so. It starts off with guns, and then eventually they kind of run out of bullets on both sides, and basically it's about a special forces police unit that goes into this building to kind of take out a gangster who runs the building, and they kind of have to go through the building, kind of fighting everybody in sight in order to accomplish their mission. And the main guy, I think his name is Iko Uwais. I'm sorry if I'm getting that wrong. But Joe Taslim is also in it, who is in another one of the films that I'm going to talk about. But it is just tremendous. I mean, it's some of the best fights that I've ever seen. It is incredibly tense. They do a great job with the narrative as well. I think the story is really good, considering that it is really just wall-to-wall action throughout. It is visceral. It's violent. It is insane in the best possible way. And, as soon as I saw it, I was like, this has to make it. And it's a shame because I've heard the second one is better. So I'm really excited to check it out. But we'll have to
rework this list and we'll have to rework this list after you finish up with that second one then.
For sure. But it is amazing. And I will say, trigger warning, it is unbelievably violent. just
literal
insane.
Trigger warning, huh?
Yeah. I mean, it's just incredibly violent. So if you are going to watch it, just be aware of that. And it's also on subtitles, which should not be a problem for anyone. But I'm just letting you know. So
noted. Well, I don't know. I might be a little scared of that one, but I might check it out. My number 5, this one, again, going back to my qualifications here, but I went with Sicario at number 5, which is a mix of like drama, suspense, thriller, and action. So, but it's got some really good action sequences, very tense. I love this movie. I think I just love the world. I mean, it's the real world, but just like the intensity of the world that they built. It's our guy Denis Villeneuve. So, got to ride with him. Emily Blunt in there, Benicio del Toro. So, I mean, this is one that I'm pretty sure you're a big fan of this movie as well, Jake. So, I was glad to see it make my list. Had to beat out some tough competition in the honorable mentions, but Sicario made it.
Yeah, no, I'm actually, I don't know if I would categorize it as action just in terms of my view, which is exactly why it's not on the list, which is exactly why Skyfall isn't on the list. But Sicario is amazing. I mean, it's just the reason why. It's just I don't think that it kind of fit the parameters in which I was actually looking for. But great choice, great suggestion. It is truly a great film for sure.
Number 4. Let's hear it, Jake.
Number 4, I had to put in John Wick. I just one of them, and I had to go with the third one. This is a contentious pick because I know a lot of people think that the first or the second one is better than the third one. But in terms of what I wanted from an action movie, just those two questions again, or those two statements again, John Wick met both of those with flying colors. I mean, watching this in the theater, it was probably the most fun and the best time that I had in the theater of 2019. Just because, I'm such a fan of the series. I'm such a fan of Keanu Reeves. I'm such a fan of Chad Stahelski. Anyone that knows me knows that I absolutely flat out love the world that they built. I think that is so incredibly unique within the confines and pretenses of being our own world, like you said, with Sicario. But, it's the same thing. It's that wall-to-wall action. It's, some people think it's to the point where it's like exhausting. And, I was listening to a interview with Chad Stahelski who said, like, we wanted you to feel as exhausted as John Wick does. So it was an intentional choice. It was a choice that worked really well for me. And the whole series is incredible, but if I had to go with one, just like the pure action and adrenaline that came with John Wick 3 is something that definitely made it the number 4 spot.
Yeah, that is all. We'll get back to the John Wick franchise, but I agree with that. Number 3 was not the one that made my list, but as far as world building goes and stuff, that's you couldn't ask for much more there. But I think that I remember when we talked about these originally that I had watched all 3 for the first time in like a week span. So they kind of all are just one cohesive movie for me. But yeah, I mean, that's all excellent stuff. I know you love those movies. So like I said, we'll get back to that in a minute. But for my number 4, another one that's kind of flirting with on the line between genres, but I went with Baby Driver.
Okay, that's a good choice.
Not really like there is shooting, but it's not really like a Extraction style shoot 'em up movie. But I mean, just tons of incredible stunt sequences. I love the car chases. All of that stuff is just enthralling to watch, to see them like drive up on the wall, drift, and do basically like Fast and the Furious type stuff, but better. But yeah, I mean, and again, it's got some romance, some drama, some thriller vibes in there as well. So it's a good blend of different genres, but plenty of action in there to make my list.
Yeah, no, I love Baby Driver. Edgar Wright is, phenomenal. And I definitely respect that pick for sure.
Number 3.
Number 3 for me is another Indonesian action film. It's not directed by Gareth Evans this time. It was directed by Timo Tjahjanto, which is called, so my number 3 is The Night Comes for Us. It came out 2 years ago. It's still on Netflix. It currently holds a 90% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is well-deserved because it truly is just as stunning and just as sort of breathtaking as The Raid is. Joe Taslim and Iko Uwais kind of come back, or reprise. It's like a completely different film, but they're both in this one as well. And it is just amazing. So basically, like the quick synopsis for those that don't know. So the film is based on a top organized crime enforcer who decides to turn his back on his former life as a killer to rescue a young girl. The crime syndicate sends in a rising gang prospect and legions of thugs to eliminate the enforcer and the young girl. So similar to sort of an Extraction about the protection aspect of it, but it is just, It is probably the most violent movie I've ever seen in my life. So like another trigger warning there. But it is just stellar. It's stunning. I mean, it's amazing. It's similar to The Raid. They do a great job of mixing the wall-to-wall action in there, as well as like having a really good story and kind of, the performances, both in terms of stunts, in terms of fights, in terms of sets, in terms of dialogue and narrative as well, are all just amazing. It is one of the finest action films I've ever seen in my life. And it was like for people that love action films, I think that there's no better choice than to check out The Night Comes for Us. I mean, of course it is like tremendously violent, but it really makes you sit back and think like, how did they make this movie? Because the actors are just so talented in terms of memorizing the thousands and thousands of moves for fight choreography. The camera work is excellent. The violence is brutal. It's visceral and it feels real. The stakes are tremendously high throughout. I mean, it's just one of those things where you just have to sit back and you realize like what you're watching, which is one of the finest action films I've ever seen.
Another one that I have not seen, but like you said, it's on Netflix. So myself and everyone else who wants to see the most violent movie you've ever seen, we can check it out. For me, number 3, I know this is probably going to make you upset, but my number 3 is Mad Max Fury Road.
Oh, wow. Really?
Because, well, okay. I don't,
you're going to have to explain yourself there.
It's not any slight at all at the movie itself. It's just that I don't have this strong connection to it like you do. I've only seen this movie once, I think, so that's on me. I feel like if I were to revisit this, it would climb this list even higher probably, and most other overall movie lists that I have. But I mean, when you talk about how did you do this and could I do that, this is just one of those ones that kind of goes hell no both ways. It's nonstop from what I remember. I know it's highly respected. Like I said, I was looking up some of those lists for inspiration, and this was number 1 across the board. And I feel like we'll kind of get some of that a little bit later here, but not to spoil anything. But I mean, number 3 for me. So I hope you don't hate me too much.
No, it's okay. It's okay. We'll forgive you. We'll forgive you for it. Don't worry.
Thank you.
So my number 2 is Mission Impossible Fallout. It is, again, it's one of those that, it just comes back to those 2 statements where I could not do any of it. And I wonder how they did it. The Empire podcast did an interview with Christopher McQuarrie about Mission Impossible Fallout. And it is just like, it's so fascinating to hear like how their process and working with both like, 2 tremendous people like Christopher McQuarrie being the actor, and of course, the director, and Tom Cruise, of course, being one of the great action stars and one of the great actors of our generation. Is it's a tremendous film. I know it made a lot of money at the box office because the Mission Impossible franchise, of course, always makes a lot of money, but this one was incredible. It really is one of those. Just going back to talking about how to mesh the story with the action. And this is definitely, I think that out of the list and the honorable mentions, I think the Mission Impossible Fallout's story, their plot, the script is definitely the strongest out of every single film that I'm mentioning, even my number 1. So it's some like eye-popping stunts, some eye-popping, action sequences. And it really is one of the best action films of all time. So
respect. Number 2 for myself is John Wick. I'm going original, although number one. Although any given day this could be a 1, 2, or 3. I feel like, but I decided to go with 1, and what pushed me that direction is just the fact that was the start of everything. I mean, the start of this kind of not only like this series itself, this franchise, but kind of this type of movie a little bit. Like, I mean, I'm sure there were action movies that were nonstop shoot 'em up like that before, but like you were mentioning with Chad Stahelski and like that style of shooting, not guns, but shooting a movie, like the way that they did move the camera in that, and just the constant action, the level of stunt choreography and fight choreography that it took. I mean, I've seen on the third movie, I have the Blu-ray and like the bonus features, and just seeing like the level of commitment and investment in designing the stunts and how they do everything is incredible. And I mean, this whole franchise has the blend of violent action in combat, but then also like the stunt action as well. So I mean, that's why it's number 2 on my list. It's we love Keanu, we love Chad Stahelski, the Boogeyman, the Baba Yaga is up there.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, I mean, that's you can't argue by putting a John Wick film at any kind of point in this list in my mind. So definitely understand it, definitely agree with it. Solid choice as always. My number 1.
I wonder if anyone can guess it.
Yeah, at this point, like if you can, I just don't even think you know who I am. I mean, it's Fury Road. The jig is up. You know? I mean, it's like
shocker.
No surprise there. I've probably seen Fury Road 9 times, I think, if I was keeping track. I actually just recently saw it with my brother. We rewatched it a few weeks ago, and I finally convinced him that it is the greatest film ever made. And regardless of any genre, I think it is the greatest film ever made, period, point blank, period, regardless. And every time I see it, it reaffirms it. Anytime I'm sort of straying away from that, I go back and rewatch it, and I'm like, I was on the right path to begin with. It really is one of those things. I think that there's a certain sort of mathematical precision needed to execute the sheer stunts, the sheer wonder, the driving, everything that they did throughout the space, like all of it being practical, is just like, it's mind-boggling. Like to this day, it's still like, I don't know how the film was made without anyone dying. And, you know, the fact that like, it was made so successfully, and, you know, it won 6 Oscars. It should have won more. It's just tremendous. I mean, it really is. Time and time again, every time I see it, I'm like, this is the best movie ever made. And it is an action movie. So that's why it's number 1.
Again, I will have to revisit that so that I can see if it holds up, if everything that you say holds up. I watched that freshman year at the Varsity Theater on Franklin Street. So, you know, it's a great theater. I don't know if that screen does it justice, but I'll revisit that. My number 1, you have said it, Jake, already. Mission Impossible Fallout, best action movie of the 2010s for me. It was the number 3 movie of the year of 2018 on my rankings. So, I mean, it's one that beyond action, I just love this as a movie itself. It's got everything you want from like you mentioned earlier, with the story, the narrative side of things. It's far more than just explosions and stunts. And I mean, it's peak Tom Cruise, man. You've seen,
for sure.
We were talking about him earlier, and just the fact that he's doing everything himself, putting himself out there, whether it's a halo jump or breaking his ankle and running down this set. Like, it's, you couldn't ask for anything else in a movie. And I mean, this one is, all the Mission Impossible movies. I saw it when I was looking at those lists. It was like top 10, and 3 of them were Mission Impossible movies, with Ghost Protocol, Fallout, Rogue Nation, all the, like, basically any of them that came out in the 2010s made the list. But for me, it's Fallout. That's the number 1. It's a great movie to revisit too, just to kind of, again, marvel at how things actually came about. And it's my number 1. That's it. Mission Impossible Fallout.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you can't go wrong here. You know, I would say that they're interchangeable for me, but unfortunately they aren't. But Tom Cruise really is, I think he's criminally underrated as an actor. I mean, you know, an action hero he is through and through. I mean, you know, he's always been that way. That's why, I mean, we talked about it earlier. I have no problem with him being, you know, 58, 59 when he's filming these, and then 60 when they come out, because I know that, you know, he is the man for the job. You know, this is always his mission, and he always chooses to accept it. But I do think that he really is one of the finest actors of our generation because of his commitment to the roles. and because of how talented he really is. So Fallout is an incredible film. I have no problem with you putting it at number 1.
I appreciate that. Thank you for your validation there.
Yeah, absolutely. But you need to watch. If you're not, if you're okay with watching like supreme violence, I do think that you need to check out The Raid and The Night Comes for Us.
I'll have to like give it a test and then see, maybe get 30 minutes in and see if it's something I want to stick out with the rest of it. But
The Night Comes for Us is on The Night Comes for Us is on Netflix, so I definitely recommend that. So because it's free.
I'll try and use that to ease into it, and then we'll see if I make it through. But there you have it, the 5 best and some honorable mentions action movies of the 2010s from Zach and Jake, and a nice review of Extraction. So that was a nice exchange in this never-ending time, it seems like, of rewatching stuff and seeing old movies. So a good refresher episode here. But until next time, be sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, like us on Facebook, subscribe on YouTube. We've got a new YouTube channel at Inside Film Room on all of those. Make sure to subscribe, give us a 5-star review in Apple, Stitcher, or Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And be on the lookout for the next episode. We'll talk to you next week.
Absolutely. See you soon.